Hi, folks. I'm going to try the same podcast over again. I just had so many problems with the last one, so I'm just going to see if I can't rectify that and do it over, more relaxed, I guess. Let me just get my gear open here. So, hi, Mikkel. How are you? Nice to see you, man. Okay, so I had an idea for this podcast tonight, but it's much looser, I suppose you could say. Buddy. And not really as structured as The Devil Again, which I think, I don't know, I think I've done everything I can on that for now. But I want to add one other thing, because even though I have very few subscribers on this YouTube channel, the quality of people listening is astounding. Like, absolutely astounding. And I mean at a performance level as human beings, performing, if you will, as spiritual beings from different paths. And I could not be more pleased with that. That, I think, is just got to be about the most pleasing thing about doing the Telemanca review, is the quality of people I've met. And that includes the people I've met who are under severe attack. And they're under attack because they're advanced beings. And being attacked as you're expanding your consciousness is one of the things that happens. There's a number of obstacles, Dear being, hi Don. There's a number of obstacles on the path for any serious seeker. The first obstacles that you're going to encounter are society and family. Okay? So, society does not value people who seek the truth, because society is all lies. I know that sounds flippant. I know that sounds conspiratorial. I know that sounds cynical. And I would not describe myself as a cynical person. But it's just the truth. Our entire society is just built on lies. And it's getting worse and worse and worse as we go down this material paradigm that we've manifested. And even people who, in the context of November 2024, may appear as a hero, like an Elon Musk, when you pan that lens back one or two contexts and pull out for a wide shot and look at the larger picture of reality, he's not a hero. He's a hero in the microcosm of Trump and Harris. And they're both fucking buffoons. Again, just to repeat myself, I prefer Trump. He's the buffoon I like. He's the leper with the most fingers. And you got to make a choice. Alright? I think it's important to make a choice. Trump will come with a lot of problems. A lot of shit's going to unload, because in his first term, we didn't have the problems we have now. Now, granted, a lot of them are manufactured, okay, by the very forces that Trump is going to be going up against. So, I mean, I get that. But we've got 2 Jewish wars now. And Trump's a big booster of the Jews. And you know what? When I say stuff like this, people jump on me. 2 Jewish wars. What do you mean Jewish wars, Bruce? Well, there's Israel. Yeah, okay. Where's the second Jewish war, Bruce? Ukraine. Well, that's not a Jewish war, Bruce. It isn't. How many languages do the people of the book, the people of the Torah, speak among themselves? How many languages? There's only one official language in Israel, and that's Hebrew, but how many languages are there really? And I'm not including Arabic or, French or Russian or anything that might come in from diaspora Jews from different parts of the world. But what are the two main Jewish languages there? It's Hebrew and Yiddish. Anybody know where Yiddish comes from? Bueller, Bueller, Bueller. Da na 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 na. Comes from Ukraine. Yiddish evolved in Ukraine. So the only language out, and it's built off of Hebrew. Okay? It's built off of Hebrew. So it's almost like a dialect of Hebrew. That has been morphed over generations. Okay? Yiddish originated in the Ukraine. Let me verify that, because I don't want to lead anybody astray here. I hope this new mic is working. It's the old mic. The Blue Yetis aren't coming in until next week, and that'll be a whole new upgraded Talamanca review. I had a lot of rain lately, so we have a lot of mosquitoes. We've got to be a little bit careful. We got, dengue and other stuff that the mosquitoes carry up here. It's funny, I don't really worry about that stuff. I just don't worry. People say, Bruce, don't you worry about that stuff? I say, no. They say, why? I say, I don't know. I just don't worry about stuff. It's just like the day I'm going to die is the day I'm going to die. If I have to go through a horrible disease for 2 weeks with a fever of 102 and 103, aches and pains, rolling around in my bed, I assume there's a spiritual reason for it, and it's going to be good for me overall. I literally do not fear my life or life in general. At all. At all. Okay, so let's ask this. Where did Yiddish originate? Yiddish originated in Central Europe, they say, in the 9th century. The most widely accepted theory is that the language developed from the migration of Jews from France and Italy to the German Rhine Valley. Yiddish is a West Germanic language that incorporates elements from Hebrew, Jewish French, Jewish Italian, various German dialects, and Slavic languages. It's Ukraine. Okay, Ukraine literally is Central Europe, okay? And it was part of the Germanic Empire, the Prussian Empire. Okay? So trust me on this. It was Ukraine. Hang on. Was Yiddish spoken in the Ukraine? Yes, Yiddish was spoken in Ukraine, especially in central, southern, and eastern regions. It would be easier to say everybody everywhere but the West. Yiddish was once an official language of Ukraine, but is no longer so. Was not an official language of Germany, was not an official language of any Slavic country. So, my point is that Yiddish can be associated with the Ukraine. 2 Jewish wars, Israel and the Ukraine. Death porn is tonight's topic. Death porn. I want to make a very clear distinction. I didn't quite finish the point I brought up about the quality of my listeners. And this is a very difficult thing to talk about, not intellectually, But for me, it takes a little bit of courage to speak about these things in public. 'Cause, believe it or not, I still sometimes am a little preoccupied with being perceived as a little bit crazy or something. I know I'm not crazy, but I know how most people think. But I got to get over that because it doesn't serve me well. When I speak of the devil and the demons, I'm speaking about a negative universal construct that's been here since the formation of sentient life. But it needs to be pointed out that this does not represent in any way, shape, or form the limitation or totality of the evil entities that can attack a human being. And the truth is, most of them are actually extraterrestrial. Now, I believe that the rabbis and the cardinal of colleges in the Vatican, they know this. And I believe that they're just not telling people because they don't have a remedy for it. No, they may have a remedy for it. Okay? They may have a remedy for it, but the introduction of that remedy and the admission that these forces exist and have been operating on the human race for quite some time would not go over well with their generational adherents. Something like 60 generations of Catholics and 180 generations of Jews. I put 3 generations to 100 years. So 20 centuries of Catholicism would be 60 generations of Catholics. 6 millennia or 6,000 years of Judaism would be 3 times 60, which would be 180 generations. Which is 666, by the way. if you put the generations in. Now, I got to get myself centered again, figure out where this podcast is going. So, we are in the midst now of what I would consider to be maybe the biggest transformation in the history of life on this planet. Sentient life on this planet. And there have been some pretty big transformations according to the fossil record. We went from a largely dinosaur population to a humanoid population. That humanoid population went from Neanderthal to Homo sapien. Right? How these things happen, I don't know. Right? I mean, I have my theories, but there's no need for me to give my theories on these things. You know? It's a form of evolution, but it's not quite, it's not natural selection. There's reasons they want us to believe that. Because it rationalizes the way they're behaving. So if we had not had Darwin in 1855, Israel would not be able to do what it's doing in Gaza right now. See if you can make that connection. I don't like having to do your homework for you all the time. I want to make sure people are following along. I can give you some hints. In fact, I will tell you, because it's just not fair not to bring it up and then not close the thought. You can see it fairly clearly in people like Bill Maher. It's the subtle manifestation of this triumph of materialism. And remember, I think materialism is a form of pornography. From a spiritual perspective, it's life pornography. We're not supposed to be living a highly material life. We grow better in nature with less technology. And we are here to grow. And more of the technology that we're inventing coincidentally interferes with consciousness and the growth thereof. Is that an accident? I certainly don't think so. There's a force here with us on the planet that literally does not want us to wake up, that does not want us to grow. Because the only thing that can beat all of these weapons and all of these systems they are building are awakened human beings following spiritual law. And so they can't have that. And so they know, I know, many of you who listen to me probably know as well, there's a leap forward coming. What causes it? I don't know. Talk to an astrologer. They might have an answer. It's just a natural cyclic event, okay? Some people, the New Agers get into it a little bit. I'm not sure I buy their explanations, Stuff like the turning of where we are, our solar system in the Milky Way, is opening us up to more light energy, not just our sun, but light photons from the center of the galaxy, or some such nonsense like this. Like I said, I don't really understand it, nor do I care. And really, neither should you. Okay? I mean, there's a lot of stuff. The more you think about it, that kind of pseudo-spiritual practice is materialism encroaching on spirituality. Okay? It's materialism encroaching on spirituality. Spirituality should just be spirituality, which is the search for spirit, which is in an early infantile form, spirit is imagination. I'm talking the way we, as an individual unit of perception, a unit of consciousness, the way we experience spirit. We first experience in our imagination. And not everybody has imagination, believe it or not. It's something you get after a number of human incarnations. You don't get it right out of the gate. When you first become a human being, Wow, at least 7% of Ukraine's population declared Yiddish as a first language in 1989. A first language. Not a second language. You know how, like, if you grew up in the United States or Canada, you went to school with kids who spoke perfect English, you make friends with them, you go visit their house, you go, wow, the hell are your parents speaking? Oh, that's Greek. I'm Greek. Oh, that's Urdu. I'm Pakistani. We're from Pakistan. My parents are speaking Urdu. Oh, that's Lebanese. I'm Lebanese. My parents are speaking Lebanese. They came here in their 20s. That's what it's like growing up in a multicultural society. But the Greek, the Lebanese, and the Urdu, once you emigrate, it's your second language. So technically, English is my second language now, because my daily functional language for paying bills, going to the bank, going to the grocery store, going to the hardware store, talking to my wife, talking to my in-laws, talking to my neighbors, it's all Spanish. So my first language is Spanish right now. It's my language of utility. It's my language of survival. But in my home, I speak English. I'm speaking English to you folks right now on this podcast. That is an incredible thing that 7% of Ukraine's population in 1989 declared Yiddish as a first language. Okay? Now, I can't help myself, but, as facts come in, I respond to them. Go back to last night's podcast, The Devil Again, Part 2. Or was it The Devil Again? It was one of the last two podcasts where I played that Rick Spence historian on the Lex Fridman podcast. Okay? So, I rewatched it again a couple times because I really wanted to understand this. And I consider it gifted information, like stuff that fell into my lap that I had asked questions about recently. And this is how it works. I guess you could say that the information's always there, but until you ask the question, you won't tune into the answer when it passes through your life. Okay? It's just the way our minds work and our attention works. But he said that the protocols of the learned elders of Zion were written in 1904 or 1905. He couldn't say for sure. Like if you sit down and you watch the whole video, he'll say parts of it were plagiarized from French texts. And he says there was a lot of anti-Semitism in France as well. And he'll cite the Richard Dreyfuss case, which was a French serviceman in the military who was charged with treason or espionage, and it was a big deal because he was Jewish, and they were saying, well, we can't trust the Jews. This is something you hear throughout history. And the Jews always say it's anti-Semitism. And why I'm focusing on this one instance of the Rick Spence interview with Lex Fridman is because Spence threw a hand grenade into the whole argument of anti-Semitism without even realizing it. He was actually trying to be a sycophantic goy and support the idea of anti-Semitism, but he accidentally threw a hand grenade into it. If you sit down and you watch the interview, Fridman knows. Look at his face. He fucking knows. He's just sitting there, not asking any questions, straight-faced, going, I hope the guy don't figure this out. And he knows. You can see it on his face. I've watched it 3-4 times. He knows the connection can be made. And I'm making it right now on my podcast. And there's a reason I'm bringing it up again. This wasn't the podcast. I never do the podcast I intend to do. I turn the camera on, I turn OBS on, I turn the mic on. I start with an idea and a concept, and by the time I'm 10-15 minutes into it, I've done a hard right turn. It's like a guy who wakes the family up on a Saturday and says, come on, we're going to go for a quick vacation. We're going to go to Kentucky. And then he makes a hard right, and Dad, where are you going? I changed my mind. We're going to Memphis. That's like me on my podcasts. Those of you who saw the first draft of this podcast I did tonight and took down because of sound issues, you know what I mean. That was sort of the podcast I meant to do. This one is going on, and it's because I looked up this Yiddish thing. And again, it just fell into my lap. So according to Spence, the most anti-Semitic and one of the most, as he calls it, one of the most destructive pieces of literature ever written, the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, pure rubbish, pure nonsense, not a scintilla of truth to it, pure anti-Semitism, originated in Russia in 1904 or 1905, drafted by the Okara, which was the secret police of the Tsar of Russia. And Russia was still an aristocracy at that time. Okay? And then in 1917, the Russian Revolution started, and at least 10 million people were killed, probably double that. And most of them were Christians, and most of the people doing the killing were Jews who were appointed to the Russian, the Communist Revolutionary Secret Police, we'll call it. They were all Jews. Look it up yourself. I'm not making this up. I'm not being anti-Semitic. Now, the point I made on the Devil Again podcast was, by bringing this up in context to anti-Semitism, it's a perfect example to judo flip it and see that, look, the Okara did not write that because they hated Jews. They wrote that because they were reading Russian society correctly, knowing what the Jews wanted to do, and they were preparing a report for the Tsar, who was a Christian, an Eastern Orthodox Christian, and very devout, by the way. Okay? Now, like I say, I don't have a horse in this race. I think all of these religions are pretty much bunk. The only thing that has ever worked for me in terms of manifesting spiritual experience, which is light, miracle, coincidence, synchronicity, is meditation. I couldn't give a shit if both the King James Bible and the Torah got thrown into a fire, and the Quran for that matter, I would not put my hand into the fire to rescue any one of those books. Sorry. And you don't make a lot of friends saying stuff like this. If you just talk a bunch of anti-Semitic nonsense, a certain kind of Christian likes you, and a lot of Muslims like you. But I'm not going to pander to that. Muslims are as fucking dumb as any Abrahamic religion out there. Maybe the stupidest, actually. Well, no, I don't think that's fair. I think I'm speaking from the influence of Western media. They invented a lot of stuff. They've had some golden ages of Renaissance and invention, and they've had some profound mystics. Most notably, as I keep saying, Ibn Arabi, Arabi, A-R-A-B-I, and I keep saying this because you should look him up. You should read what this guy has to say. It's like beyond Gnosticism, and he was an experiencer. He was an experiencer. He was a guy who went to different dimensions and wrote about them. This is what this dimension is like. This is what this dimension is like. This is what happens to people when they die. And it's scientifically accurate. He was an experiencer. He was able to get out of his body. And he's considered the seal of the saints in Islam. But I digress. So the Russian secret police did not write the protocols of the learned elders of Zion saying that Jews wanted to take over the world and they controlled media and banking in Western Europe, and they wanted to control it all over the world. They didn't write that because they were anti-Semitic. They wrote it because it's true. And 12 years later, their country got ravaged by these very Jews. They wrote the security report called the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion to warn their Tsar about and to warn the world about. And then you get Hitler a little while later, and he's like, he sees, Germany is neighbor to Russia. Okay? He sees what they do in Russia, and he says, that's not coming into Germany. Okay? Now we find out that at least 7% of Ukraine's population declared Yiddish as a first language in 1989. And that percentage would have been a lot higher 150 years ago, or 120 years ago in 1904, 1905. So, if you want to follow the chaos, follow the Jews. So, you got a large Jewish population. The Holodomor, Holodomor, also known as the Ukrainian famine, was a man-made famine in Soviet Ukraine from 1932 to 1933 that killed millions of Ukrainians. That's pretty, it's very, right away, the fact that they don't give you a ballpark figure. When is the last time you read anything on the internet sanctioned about the Jewish Holocaust where you were not immediately given the figure of 6 million Jews. You see, it's becoming so transparent now. It's just facile to do these podcasts. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. Like, I don't even want to do it. I don't even want to do it. So that was a bunch of... The Jews hated the Ukrainians because the Ukrainians kept the Jews in a certain position in that society. And Jews always want to be in control. The protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion clearly state that the Jews want to take over the world. We're told time and time again, even 4 or 5 days ago on a 3-hour, 28-minute Lex Friedman podcast, Russian Jewish fellow, 4.3 million subscribers to the Lex Friedman podcast, and we are told that this is an anti-Semitic trope. And yet at any time you can turn on YouTube or BitChute or Rumble now, and you can see these rabbis in Israel and in the United States, the Chabad guys, saying exactly what the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion say, which are basically explaining or extracting basically the philosophy or meaning of the Talmud as well. Like, it's a no-brainer. You don't have to be a genius to figure these things out. Right? And I'm not talking about these things because I have a special axe to grind with the Jews. It's not like it's any less horrific what the Hutsis did to the Tutsis in Rwanda in the 90s. It's not like it's any less horrific what's going on in the Congo. Okay? It's not like it's any less horrific what Saudi Arabia did to, where was it, Yemen? Yeah, I think it was Yemen. Or it was one of those poor OPEC countries. So just beat the shit out of them. But you see, here's the difference. The Congolese, the Saudis, and what was the other one I mentioned? The Rwandans. They don't want to take over the world and do that to me. And they're never going to instigate World War III. At most, they're going to create problems that send in UN peacekeeping forces and cost us all a little bit of money in UN dues and so on and so forth to tamp down the animosity between two tribal groups in a country, whether it be Congo, Rwanda, or Saudi Arabia and one of its neighbors. It's got nothing to do with us. And sometimes Jewish people will use that as an excuse, or they'll try to use that to make you look stupid or anti-Semitic. They'll say, and they know all the atrocities going on in the world. I think they jerk off to this shit, to be honest, and I'm not even joking. And they'll go, oh, well, why don't you have an opinion on this, and this? And for me, this usually happens in a comment debate. If I comment on a newspaper story on Facebook or something, and I say, because that's not really going to affect me. That's regional karma. Jews are global karma. One day you're going to be a problem for me. That's why. Boom. The moment you say that, all the debate stops. It just disappears. Because they don't even know what to say to that. Right? But anyways, my God. How did death porn end up being all about this? It's interesting that I just made this connection again. So, I mean, it's right in front of us. And it's pure and clear evidence that our history is compromised, our news is compromised, everything is compromised in favor of the Jews. And another thing Rick Spence kept doing in that Lex Friedman interview was he kept saying, well, it's a toss-up between who they hate more, the Freemasons or the Jews. Clearly, he's never studied this from a religious perspective, because they're the same thing, basically. Freemasonry is Kabbalah for Goy. Okay? So it's amazing that a guy could be a tenured professor and a respected enough historian that Lex Friedman would invite him on his podcast and literally be that stupid. But I suspect that's why Friedman brought him on. Right? But tonight I'm talking about materialism and things like this. I'm talking more about the direction we're going as a society and where it's ultimately going to lead. And it's ultimately going to lead to a lockdown consciousness and a lockdown body. We're all going to be on probation inside our bodies as living spirits. This is their goal. This is the goal of transhumanism. If you think this is to make us better, you're a fucking idiot. Sorry to tell you. You're a fucking idiot. You have no spiritual context for what's going on this planet. You don't understand that we are in a spiritual war. And it's largely a war between extraterrestrial races that are rooted in a non-human form, like the reptilians, and human form reptilians, like Pleiadians, Nordics, and things like this. And it's always been this. There's 99% of the angel and demon shit is extraterrestrial. Okay? So, and then from there you can figure out who's who. Okay, so we all get this same suit to appear in this theater called Earth, but this human being is not an original, evolutionary, natural, organic, source-derived, God-derived evolution. There are 22 different alien DNAs in any given human body. 22. This experience as a human being was constructed for races that had already matured in other forms and then wanted to come into a human form for a certain purpose or reason. And part of that reason may have been to solve disputes. We may be a dispute resolution incarnation. So a bunch of Pleiadians and a bunch of reptilians incarnate on this planet, and they all have the human form. They're all equal in the body, but what they're bringing in differently is their astral associations. But they take the base element of the body and build a life from there. I know it sounds crazier than science fiction. I know it sounds like a mix between religion and science fiction, but I assure you this is what's going on. And not because I figured it out, but because I was basically told. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Okay? So I got so far off track, the original podcast, I don't know where to go from here. The problem with this Jewish topic is it usually dead ends in frustration. It's so hopeless. It's so full of despair. Right? But clearly it's them. It's not like, so if the decision is, have these people been the subject of virulent anti-Semitism or racism and prejudice for centuries and centuries, and we're just jealous now because they survived and they've proved to be victorious and they're coming to a leadership position in the world? Or is it true that they did all these horrible things through history? The bloodletting, the killing of Gentile children at Passover and outside of Passover, all of these revolutions, they were instrumental in the upheaval of Spain, instrumental in the upheaval of France, instrumental in the upheaval. They took over the Bank of England. They started the Bank of England. It was a Jewish enterprise from its inception. That was the whole point of Cromwell. And now we're looking at what they did in Russia and Ukraine in the Prussian Empire. E. Michael Jones is right. They're natural-born agitators. And they're natural-born malcontents. It's not anti-Semitism, it's them. And we're at the climax of their story now, where they go home, back to Israel and Jerusalem, but not to live peacefully and quietly and to restore the Jewish culture allegedly destroyed by the Romans in 72 AD. No, that would be far too modest for our Hebrew friends, but to rule the world from Jerusalem. But the protocols of the learned elders of Zion is pure anti-Semitic nonsense. folks, it's all just right in front of you. You just read it, look at it. It's right in front of you. It's so unbelievably plain now it isn't funny. Because it can't hide any longer. Because that's the age we live in, where all the truth is just bubbling up. So I think I'm going to end it there for tonight, because I kind of got off track and I don't want to just keep doing this. So that's my second crack at death porno. I'll try it again tomorrow night, and I trust this microphone worked well and everything went well. So peace out. I'm Bruce McDonald. This has been the Talamanca Review.